Hi. Let me introduce chaos into the situation. I'm an agent of chaos, and obviously, clearly, I'm such an agent of chaos that hear my words and try to prevent them. Try to prevent my words now. Even if you didn't listen to this, it's still out there. So good luck getting rid of it. But I mean somebody could, but like I guess use a platform that's more immutable. But you get CNN, and like I'm saying, if I use a decentralized video sharing source, which I'm going to move all my videos to decentralized video sharing, like Theta is a cryptocurrency that does decentralized video sharing, and I'm going to move my videos onto there so that they can be on there because I would possibly get more assistance from them, certainly more so than YouTube. YouTube doesn't assist me in any way, and it's buried under, but YouTube, like my videos are buried under, however, because of YouTube, this vast megalithic video sharing empire where but like centralized too, the same way that any empire has billions of dollars. I mean, not billions of dollars, but any empire has its aristocracy that have all the power and the visibility and all the wealth. And YouTube is centralized, it's an empire. And 800-588-2300 empire. It's the kind of empire that it is, but YouTube is like it's a empire that has wealth, and then they give benefits to the people who are already the most wealthy. But I mean, the longer that system is in place, is the more that it's like the French masses are boiling over with their hatred for the aristocracy, and they want a revolution. The longer that the system is in place is kind of like the longer that the kings and queens lose touch with what the people want. And like YouTube has been around for too long, and now their ability to circulate videos or give a voice to the people that are on the bottom is they are losing the ability to do that more and more. But I mean, they don't really care so much about providing a voice to anybody anymore, but they're basically going to go out the door in lieu of decentralized video sharing. Cryptocurrencies will do better than YouTube in the future. YouTube will be replaced by decentralized applications. So will all centralized mega corporations of today. They will lose out to decentralized platforms, and that's my message to you. That's why I'm here. I'm here for that. I think that I need to be more stylistic. I need to have more style. Like maybe I should it's late in the game or whatever, but I mean, I guess style, like stylize everything, representation, color, flavors, style, having a style, being particular rather than it's easy to be basic or square or like fall in line with that same way. Like it's easy to be awkward, but awkward is, let me talk about awkward for a minute. Like there's awkward, but people don't usually measure what how awkward somebody is, or it's kind of difficult to measure it because most of the time, like maybe people don't take a very intelligent approach to this situation, because it's like a lot of times we address awkward as you either are or you aren't, rather than that there's like a spectrum for how awkward you can be. But it's like, it's because it's a difficult thing to measure or point out, like, okay, what's awkward or what isn't. Like there isn't enough awareness for this issue. I think it's the same with embarrassment. Like there's not enough discussion about it. All that we know is like embarrassment bad, so everybody avoids it. And then you have people like Nardwar who exploit this loophole, and he's a Canadian, so he's not born and bred into the system of fear of embarrassment that Americans would have. Nardwar is Canadian. I mean, I think that Canada has an advantage over America in some areas just because of the socioeconomic landscape of Canada is different, and so then they don't. There's stereotypes that happen in America, and a lot of it has to do with the media has too much influence in America, and they propagandize a lot and dissuade the masses with all these dramatic storylines. Like America is more dramatic, and they allow the news to publicize a lot of drama that they eat up and make their lives. It's the same as like America, like paparazzi culture and celebrity culture and wanting fame brings about in American society all of these harmful like stereotypes, like a lot of ones you wouldn't even be thinking about, but probably something like emotional abuse that people, individual people, regular people receive and incur regularly just by regular interaction because of expectations. Like Americans maybe have more expectations on them to pursue the American dream or make their dream come true, or just higher standards, and then people not meeting those standards is what causes anxiety. And anxiety has a lot to do with somebody self-comparison, and then you feeling like you don't exist in reality because you don't meet the standards that you think you're supposed to, because people lie about their situation and communication isn't open enough. So you, like, people see in their friends and family that all of this is going right, and then they get anxiety because they don't have the same things or they don't feel the same way. Or I mean, just self-comparison where people see that, like, it seems like everybody else has really happy lives, because you're not supposed to, in America, you're not supposed to say that your sacrifices didn't work out for you. You didn't receive a return on investment. America is more money focused, and so people aren't willing to admit that they made bad sacrifices or wasted their time. And then anxiety gets brought about quite a bit because like a regular person realizes that they're screwing up all the time and making bad choices and wasting their time. And then, like, you might get it in your head that you don't even exist in reality, because as far as you know, in reality, everybody you see around you is not wasting their time or making the right choices or whatever. And it's just a result of that communication isn't open enough. I don't know that it's more open in Canada, but it's like Nardwuar. I'd say that Nardwuar does this thing with embarrassment where he makes sure that everybody is okay with it, that he interviews, because when Nardwuar interviews somebody, he makes it as I mean, it's different from the way anybody else would interview, but he's obviously, like, he's doing things that would embarrass you, or you have to overcome something. You have to overcome embarrassment or something like that. Like Nardwuar makes it so that you won't be able to look cool or have an answer for everything, which it's like there's a lot of that in American culture. So he's like he's like futuristic in his approach, I'd say. Like he is Nardwuar, and the kind of way that he reports and does interviews shows you like we need to progress towards a future where people aren't embarrassed by things, but like embarrassment has such a hold over people now. And it's just kind of like I'm saying that maybe it's too low resolution, or we just have one view of it where we're like embarrassment is like it's just this one thing and it's always bad, but that's just not an intelligent approach. It's closed-minded because it's just a fear of, like, it's where people are trying to control embarrassment to look the way that they want it to look, where they're just going to say embarrassment is always bad, or like rather than engaging in it, rather than going into that world where you are embarrassed, a lot of people try to make the world one where embarrassment doesn't even exist, and then this leads to a lot of embarrassing situations. But like most of all, just that embarrassment happens at any social gathering, but then you're like, people just want to ignore it always or brush it aside, and when that happens, embarrassment just goes into the subconscious of the country rather than that it's out in the open. I mean, if everybody across the culture is practicing the same things with regard to embarrassment or awkwardness, it's like it's like imprisoning or maligning or discriminating against a certain group of people is the same thing. certain group of people or a certain person is the same thing as discriminating against an idea. And it's like embarrassment becomes a problem. And then if we're not dealing with it, it just gets brushed aside, and it goes into our subconscious rather than that we're dealing with it and like figuring out why that thing is discriminated against. But it's like the society is always saying like everything is free and open, we're doing everything in the name of not discriminating against anybody, but yet at every single point in history there's a group of people that's being discriminated against, whether you like it or not. And it's just like it'll seem obvious that you're supposed to discriminate against a racist or discriminate against a bully or somebody, like a group of people, a person that you know is bad, but it's just a matter of interpretation where over time, like it's a matter of interpretation where, like, if you're saying that that thing is negative, you can't, not everybody, it can't be the point of view across everybody that that thing is negative, because it'll come around where you have to be able to see the positive in something, like things aren't 100% bad or 100% good. And so then you might be thinking like, how would I say racism is in any way good? But that's the thing, is that there's this group of people in the country, they're like NBC basically. NBC comes out and they're like, hey, we have the standard for racism, and so we actually know what it means to be a racist or not. That's what NBC says. They're like, and by the way, we know what racism is, and here is the picture of it. It is this, is when a policeman does this, or like when a black person loiters in Starbucks and then somebody throws them out, that's racism, and that is the thing that we're trying to stamp out here. And there's a lot of people that think that NBC is canon for the entire world or for racism or whatever. They agree for some reason. They think that NBC gets to tell you how you're supposed to treat all races, which is, of course, a ludicrous idea, because NBC doesn't own racism. They want to tell you that they do. They just provide a standard, but like in reality, it's ridiculous that any individual person would come up to you and tell you, "Hey, you're a racist because of these three things, because you met this criteria. This makes you a racist." In reality, there's no standard for what makes somebody a racist or not. It's all up to interpretation. Really, being a racist, I would say, is emphasizing race unnecessarily, kind of the way that NBC does, like bringing it up as a point, like that NBC uses it, holds it over people, holds it over the entire nation to say, hey, you have to listen to our standard of racism, otherwise you might be liable for racism. We might be able to paint you as a racist, actually, if you don't hold to our standards of racism. It's something that they hold over everybody just because they already have power to tell you, like, oh, by the way, this is the narration for you. And like in reality, they don't know anything more about racism than you or I does. And I'd say that they do a poorer job of saying, I mean, they really have no right to say this is what's good and this is what's bad with regard to like how you're supposed to deal in racism. Their standard isn't better than anybody else's. It's just a matter of interpretation. But like because what do they? It's just that like it's just that people think that there's this utopia where we will, like, one day we'll progress to where we have stamped out all racism, will eradicate every single racist. But if you believe that this utopia exists, you're saying that there's a standard, you're saying that there's an answer for racism, as if there's only one race, or as if there's somebody on earth that gets to decide on behalf of all races or something. Like society is going to decide. Like if you're saying that there's this utopia where we eradicate all racists, you're saying that there's an answer, like that it will come to some conclusion, and then this standard like everybody, you want a world where everybody agrees about what race is, and then this standard lasts for all of eternity. That's impossible. Nobody has that standard. Nobody gets to call somebody else a racist in reality. I would say that being a racist is just kind of like emphasizing race a lot when you don't need to. Like if you have a podcast or something and you cover race, that makes you more, if you bring it up, if you call white people white a lot, or like this becomes a talking point for you, you use race to further your agenda, you use it in any way for any color of person, that if you are using race more and the drama of it, like the way that CNN does to make money, so that they can survive the same way that they've done for like 50 years across whatever, like MLK protests, across riots in Los Angeles in the 90s, whatever, for decades, NBC has been capitalizing off of race, and they're some of the primary racists that are out there because they emphasize it unnecessarily. Like people who bring it up a lot, that's more racist. When you bring up race more, you're being racist. And so like eradicate all discussion of race, like that's what MSNBC wants to do. And so basically they're saying they themselves need to be eradicated because they are constantly propagating race material for the nation. And I forget what I was originally mentioning, but like the word bully actually used to be a term meaning lover or brother. And it was like a bully was a term of endearment meaning sweetheart like 350 years ago. But then over time, people are like, actually, that's a word meaning bully. That's a word meaning somebody who intimidates other people. Over time, that is what was decided about bully. Said it's not your lover. It's somebody who bullies people, but it's like you can kind of see the influence of that today. It's just the word stayed the same. Bully stayed the same word. It's just that perception changed where everybody was like, oh, it was positive before, and then perception changed where everybody made it negative, where they're like, oh, we see that as a negative thing. And you can kind of see how a bully is like a lover even today because they single out the person that they're bullying. But it's like the bully relationship with the person that's being bullied is a two-way street, really. Like ultimately, and it's like nobody can make fun of you without your own consent kind of thing. Like if a bully is bullying you, that's a two-way street. Like that's a relationship that people get into. It's kind of like a submissive dominant thing where it's like a relationship where the person being bullied is consenting to it. I mean, maybe it's like against their will, but I mean, it might offer you certain benefits like, oh, I'm being bullied. It offers you a victimhood or a drama that you're involved in. And it's like you are being singled out and that gives you something. And like it's not all on the bully, not completely, but there is something loving about it, or like they're singling you out to bully you, and that's like what. And I'm saying that this is like it's almost like you're offered some protections for being in this drama, where you're like, I mean, you're accepted as something. It's just that you get a lot of hateful love, but it's kind of like bully is a little bit a word for a hateful kind of love. But I mean, maybe that's what some people like. I don't know why people get bullied or why they don't get out of it. But you have someone getting bullied has the ability to get out of it, and so like hating bullies is just a really visible, obvious thing to support or get on the side of. Everybody in society hates a bully. We need to stop bullying. But it's like a bully is. Maybe it's more the case that bully isn't a title that you should give to people, but something you should recognize as a character trait that exists within people, the same way that like far-right conspiracy theory calls people in power reptiles. And I guess depending on your imagination, you could get into the territory of saying like, oh, Zuckerberg is actually a reptile, like he doubles as that and he switches to reptile form in real life just where you can't see. And like that wouldn't really be true necessarily. That wouldn't be true that they're actual reptiles of the people in power actually that, but rather that they have a character trait of being like a reptile where they're cold-blooded and have no empathy or compassion for anybody. That's how they that's how they end up getting that much power. All they care about is power rather than human connection or what it means to accommodate people or be compassionate at all. There's a lot of reptilian qualities in people that have tons of power, and there's like a character trait. So it's like reptile, I'd say, is more a character trait that we should associate, that we should give to people, rather than title somebody a reptile or like say that everything a reptile does applies to them. But it's really like maybe the world has a problem associating animal qualities with people, or they kind of skirt around it. They don't want to go all the way and say that. Like, at least in America, people liken each other, both men and women, to dogs. And so, but like people are very much like dogs. Dogs are one of the most human-like animals, is got to be the reason why they appear in our homes so much, or why humans continue to have such a relationship with dogs, is because they're so much like humans, or cats are so much like humans, probably. But like, um, yeah, like dogs are one of the most human-like animals. That's why we, like, intelligently speaking, you can tell when dogs are around. If you're around a dog long enough, that they are like a human so much more than other animals. But it's like there's dog-like behavior in humans, there's human-like behavior in dogs. Maybe the world doesn't recognize enough when somebody is being like a squirrel or any animal, or they don't, like, people don't think about animal quality or animals enough to think about how those qualities appear in people, because humans and all animals come from the same earth, and so like those characteristics are kind of shared across all species, and probably they like bleed over where you might act more like a penguin than somebody else. But I feel like this isn't really enunciated a lot from people, where people are actually allowed to say, hey, you are a snake, because that's just kind of derogatory. Or like, hey, you can't call somebody an animal, when animals, like each animal is this really specific point of reference. That's why we call them species. And so like a dog is really identifiable, like you know that it's a dog instantly over that it's a duck. I would say overall, it is like every duck they're all their own, kind of like they have their specific DNA. It's like its own technology or something. And that you wouldn't be able to recognize when somebody is acting like a dolphin. Like this should be more commonplace, or maybe it just sounds comical, but like maybe it's just, maybe people don't accept, maybe people think animals are too stupid, like that we're allowed to call anybody an animal. But it comes up sometimes where we call people rats, where, I mean, they have rat-like qualities, I would guess is part of the reason why we end up calling them a rat. And we're like, oh, they're a rat, the same way do we know that rats betray you and give up information just to hurt you or whatever, like rats in real life, the animal? I guess I don't really know for sure, but we try to say some of that. Um, but what was I saying? Do you know? Because I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I was originally saying. I was saying something about, I was talking about bullies, and I was talking about awkwardness and embarrassment before that. So let me remember that as I continue talking. So there's bullies, and like that's a two-way street, or you might end up like, it's just that a bully, that it becomes a title rather than, like, it's so discriminated against, we wouldn't even look to see like that people act like bullies, or that this is it's kind of a projection of our imagination at the point that we make it this title that kind of exists outside of ourselves. Or it's like you're applying it to too wide a group of people. Like when it comes up in the news, and the news is like, you have to malign this character, where it becomes more this title based thing, where it's like there is this group and there's this title for this group, and when this behavior is displayed in somebody, they met the three criteria for them being a bully, and so they have that title legally speaking. Like when it becomes this legal thing, where we're like the title, uh, it's like maybe more problematic or something. It's something that we're not recognizing. I'd say maybe it's just less intelligent, or like it's easier to brush off somebody to be a bully or something. But I'm just saying the society overall has trouble recognizing negative qualities and saying like these actually just appear in people rather than like people want to make it so that it's this absolutist negative point of reference is a bully, and so they're able to write it off as not existing in reality, like or somebody in prison or something. Like people go to prison, or people who engage in prison or anything like that, like we write them off. I mean, we write them out of society physically as a physical representation of what we're doing mentally. Like we write off people in prison mentally, but it's like it's all this legal shit where it's like, well, they didn't legally do all the right things all the time. They had too many felonies and they had to go to prison, or like they were outside of the law, and so we now have grounds to write you off, not just thinking about you, but physically will put you in a place where nobody's even looking at you, or you're completely silenced. Like being in a prison is being in the imperceptible realm of society, subconscious realm of society. You're completely invisible in prison. You've been relegated to this non-visible existence where it's the point is that we no longer have to think about you because you didn't follow the legal whatever, and so you reap the benefits, you reap the consequences of that. And it's like putting somebody in prison, or and so prison is then a catch-all. Prison is an unidentified kind of idea, kind of like anarchy for groups of people that are existing more on the periphery of society. And like it's a term for unidentified. It's an unidentified term, whatever. It's for unidentified people, or unidentified states of existence, is what prison does. Like prison is a catch-all for wrongdoers, of people who are outside of the law. And the law, whatever happens within the law, is what has a chance to be visible. Whatever is standardized, like the CDC or the FDA, that they provide the standard. The CNN, oh, what's visible. Like it's like as long as people want that standard. But people sometimes fail to recognize that a standard is a word for a temporary, a momentary way of knowing things, like rather than that it's supposed to be canon, or that it's immutable. Like and CNN is ultimately a standard. Like a standard is a temporary standing place, and standards are meant to be evolved so that you have new standards over time. But that's not as interesting as what I was saying, like a bully, that you make it a title. What I'm saying is that there are people that are bullies, and not just that they are actually bullying people. Like bully is this word representing certain qualities and characteristics, and it's specifically a kind of hateful love, if you think about the idea of bullying. But there's kinds of people that they would be so complicated that love, like obviously it wouldn't even be like, this wouldn't necessarily be a minority. There's lots of people that love for them would just be a hateful version of it, or something like that Taylor Swift song where she's like, boys only want love if it's torture, that kind of thing. Maybe they do, or I mean, there's lots of people that maybe love for them is something like torture. But like a kind of person that like they're a juxtaposition of character traits that are supposed to contradict each other, but because we don't have, like bully is this word that transformed from meaning a lover to being somebody who intimidates very wrongfully, or is really mean, like the opposite of a lover, so like a hater. But like people who love for them is hate, like obviously that exists. It's just like the spectrum is not explained or elaborated enough that people are like, hey, there's a love is always good, hate is always bad. But like we need to recognize kind of qualities that exist in a person, that they're like a juxtaposition of love and hate. And like we try to ignore that by saying, well, like we're always trying to get out of the negative qualities are exhibited in people by saying that like it's always what is good and what is visible. But it's kind of like the people with the most money deal in terms of visibility. And so I'm getting off topic, or I don't know, saying I'm gonna say something too abstract that I don't know how to reconcile it with everything else that I said. But I'm just saying that bully is not something that you get to endlessly discriminate against, because like bullies are a group of people that in a society that we're like, oh, we need to be open to everybody. You don't get to discriminate against any group of people for whatever, just because they have qualities that you don't understand. Um, I saw a movie called Bully. It's from 2001. I don't know if you have seen it, obviously. I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's a great movie. It's probably one of the best movies I've ever seen, maybe top 3 best movies I've ever seen. It's called Bully. It's made in 2001. Um, it points out a lot of problems about the legal system, like because it shows you it's actually based on a true story, and it goes through the lives of this group of teenagers just before they commit a murder. But it's like based on a true story of this group of teenagers that committed a murder because they got behind the sentiment of this one kid who was being bullied by another kid, and then they're like, hey, this bullying shouldn't happen. And they got on the side of the kid that was being bullied, and the group of them got together and killed the guy that was bullying. And this happened in real life. Sorry, spoiler alert, but it's really not about that so much. Like, you just watch the movie, but it's like it points out a lot about the legal system and classism. Um, I mean, whatever. It's a really chilling, dark movie, is why I like it. It's fascinating. But I hope I didn't ruin it for you by talking too much about it. But it's like, it's in retrospect, I don't really know what it's saying about bullying. I think the point that the director was making was that the main character was actually the bully, even though he was the one being bullied. But it's kind of talking about the qualities of this main character are that I'm describing, like somebody who's a bully. I mean, like, bullying is such that you might, like, if you're being bullied, this is a drama that you engage in to the point that you probably have the potential to be a bully. If that's something that you gravitate towards, is somebody who is bullied, maybe it's just that, like there's probably the opportunity that they would do the opposite of it. Or I mean, it's like a positive negative thing. Like, if you like that drama at all, you might have it might potentially be the case that you are also a bully. It's kind of what the movie is saying, but that's not why I like it. It's not the idea of bullying. I just happen to be talking about bullying. um it's like it's like that, but it's a pretty closed-minded view of it if you're not thinking about it. Like, if the person who's being bullied is always in the right, I think that that's kind of nonsense. Like, that's just a lack of recognition of the quality that is bullying, that persists in both the bullied and the bulliers. And it's like it's, as long as you're discriminating the groups of people, but it's like making the title doesn't help when, like, maybe it's more intelligent to recognize the more ethereal quality that displays itself as a character trait across many groups of people. This is more ethereal and more difficult to pin down, and you have to be more intelligent and consider more possibilities to consider how, relatively speaking, people are bullies or they are bullied. And like, um, it exists in many different forms. Like, things exist in many different forms, rather than that you're just going to rely on the news to tell you, hey, bullying is bad. And then when you see something that you think looks like that, then you legally get to say, hey, you're being a bully or whatever, or anything. Or like, but it's just committing a crime, and who's the bully there? Like, like people who are in prison would probably be seen as bullies or something negative, like, or they would be the ones most likely to intimidate each other or like try to be a bully in order to gain power, when in reality it's the legal system that's bullying everybody into prison. Um, and for what, like specifically singling out people, because in reality, when the police catch you on a crime and then they put you in prison, um, they're saying they're singling you out because you did the laws that they specifically don't want. Like this group of people, like it's weird that this club shows up because you could consider the police like a secret society. And then if you break one of this society's rules, like it would be like if Scientology had all the power in the world to like, okay, we're enforcing the laws because they are the law, because we're the police and we police policy, or like because that could exist in so many different forms, the police, and it does country to country. Maybe they call them different things, like in England they call them constables, and that, or I don't know if they still do, but like at least at some point they did. And then in Canada they have mounties. But this is just different forms of policing, but like each one of them is its own secret society where they're like, okay, you cross the secret society guidelines, and because our secret society has the most power, now it's just like, it's like when kids play cops and robbers, basically, is like this group of people, it's like, oh, you played the game and you played it wrong. It's weird that there's this group of people that's get to tell you what the game is, and they're like, oh, you crossed the rules of our game, so now in accordance with the rest of the game continues, and we caught you too. Like, oh, and you can't get caught. Like they catch you doing it. They're like, and now we get to throw you in prison. It's almost like it's almost like a game or something, because it doesn't really need to be, it doesn't really need to carry out, because what are the standards? Who gets to decide what the law is when there's so many various forms of policy enforcing that happen country to country alone? Like the style differs from country to country for what these police are, because the policy differs country to country, and it's just kind of a genre or an art form, the way that you decorate up your police, and then the kind of stereotypes that result, like America police eating donuts is probably bigger in America, or whatever. Like it's kind of just an artistic, whatever way you render your secret society of policemen, and then what goes along with that is the specific set of rules that they enforce. And they get to tell you like, hey, by the way, you broke the rules, now you're going to prison because of the rules, because our secret society wanted, because like, oh, we caught you. It's almost like a game, like ha ha ha. And also just the domineering of them catching you and whatever they're saying, like, oh, it looks like your registration is about to expire. Like any like the ways and kind of caricature ways the police have to act authoritative while you're interacting with them, or whatever, is part of the game or part of the character that they embody by being a participant in the society and the secret society, or whatever it is that they're doing. But and it's just like embarrassment and awkwardness. Awkwardness doesn't get good enough, like it's not exploited enough, and embarrassment isn't exploited enough. I would say because maybe society has this problem where like that's always bad, and so then we never have to deal with it. But I'm saying like maybe in the future we come to terms with embarrassment more, so this isn't an issue or you have to be worried. But it's like sociability and being sociable makes it so that like there's a lot, it really de-incentivizes awkwardness. And so like, so you might say that discounting and eradicating awkwardness is good, or like that is a sign of progress. Maybe getting rid of awkwardness is a sign of progress, because the most evolved the people who do the best in terms of survival and evolving probably make the most connections with other people. Like the group probably has a better chance of surviving historically than an individual does, and so you have to align yourself with a group. And probably like awkwardness is just for the less evolved, possibly. But like I think that we don't approach awkwardness intelligently enough, or we don't consider relative awkwardness, because it's kind of like if you are at a stoplight at an intersection, or like I'm trying to cross the road and then I get there at this I'm walking my dog, I'm trying to cross the road, I get there at the same time as a car, and then we're both in a standoff. We're like, no, you go, no, you go. One of those. That is awkward, actually, because it's more awkward than if that didn't happen at all, if we both got there at different times and then didn't have to interact with each other. It's just that, like, an interaction is actually always more awkward than just being alone. Um, but I'm just trying to point out the trajectory of awkward. Like, what is it? I'm wondering. I'm trying to process this. What's the trajectory of awkward? Is really like a relative state? What does it mean? Like, what is always in the direction of more awkward? Is it just more interaction? Because an interaction where we saw each other but didn't arrive at the same time, so it was obvious, like, oh, the car is going to go first. We saw each other. That's more awkward than not seeing each other at all. But what is actually awkward is where we awkwardly try to motion each other to go, because it's slightly embarrassing that we are both stupid enough that there's like not an answer right away. But I guess sort of confusion is more awkward. So I'm saying, like, what qualities correlate with awkward? That you say, like, the more confusing it is, the more awkward it is. It's like the more confused that it is, the more awkward it is. Like, too many people, but it's like embarrassing. It's kind of difficult to pin down what makes something awkward. But people tell me that I'm awkward often enough. But a part of it is just me allowing myself that excuse, or it's easy to be awkward. Like, oh, I'm so awkward. I'm so, like, it's easy to go back to that rather than that you go forward with your own style in everything you do. Like having style or having a known motivation where you're like, I like being decisive, being stylistic, or like having your own style. The results, like, probably naturally from being decisive, what results is you have your own style, because you're making individualistic choices that are original, and people can see that. Like, you stylize yourself a certain way the more that you're just confident in what you're doing and what your choice is. But awkwardness, I guess, is more indecisive, or you're bringing up, but like, what makes somebody awkward, really, like inherently awkward, so that they're always awkward, rather than that they that they make something awkward because they're shitty. Because it's like, it's a lot worse to be faux awkward, where people just like say stupid things all the time, like, that are dumb, that nobody wants to hear, that are really unappealing, unpopular, unlikable. Because, like, that's a lot more unlikable to be unlikable, rather than, like, awkward isn't necessarily unlikable, because there's a lot of awkwardness that people like, but people like the awkwardness when it's like inherent a little bit more, but they still don't necessarily like it, because it's like, it makes people uncomfortable, and generally being unlikable makes people uncomfortable. So being awkward is probably a little bit more unlikable. But there's like, if you're really awkward and then you show up, and then like, I show up, and then I wonder what would make it awkward is, what makes it awkward is just like acting like you have, like, to me, I feel like I am awkward because I go places and then I feel like I have all this to say, but I don't say it, and then, like, I'm acting as if there's shit that's unsaid, or that there's something in the air that needs to be said but isn't being said, and then, like, that there's some answer, or there's something that isn't being mentioned that I'm alluding to but never saying, that causes for awkward situations. Or just like, I don't know if I like to make it awkward, or like that's something I like to point out to people, because part of the thing is, I feel like, and it is an unsaid thing, the same way that awkwardness is more unsaid. It isn't as spoken, because you could, but like, you can say something and then that's awkward, but it's more difficult to say something that other people can sensationalize, be like, oh, that sounded really stupid, or like, that was really cringy. It's more difficult to come up with something that is memorably negative just on its own, more and more so, just as but I mean, maybe that's not true. That doesn't have to be true. You could say any dumb thing that people are like, oh, that's really awkward. But like, awkward. I feel like I want to fall back on the excuse, or like it's okay because I can be awkward, or because it's kind of fun to be awkward because you're holding things over other people, or you're not you're not coming out right and saying the thing that you want to, and like holding people at bay while not actually delivering on anything. But it's like if you're able to do that, that's not your fault that anybody is listening to you, waiting for you to hear something to say. Like if you hold people's attention, or you have a lot of presence to your presence, if there's a lot of presence with yourself or whatever, like at the point that you show up, it's not anybody's fault if anybody looks at you, or it's like trying to get people to look at you without ever having a reason for it, maybe is a little bit about it. But like I want to be awkward because I don't really want to be awkward, but like maybe it's interesting to be awkward for the sake of pointing out to people that situations themselves are awkward, but everybody tries to act like they aren't all the time. Like everybody tries to act like there's no embarrassment in the room. And so of course I'm going to be awkward. But then it makes it so that like I'm awkward everywhere where that's not happening, which is everywhere, and then it makes me inherently awkward. And like awkwardness is kind of like alluding to things and saying them without actually saying them, or giving people an obvious route or road into your conversation, um, or letting people know that this is what I mean, or not purposefully not meaning anything, or maybe just being nihilistic, or but like ribbing on things that people say without them even knowing that you're ribbing on it, or like not making that evident, right? But it's just that people always try to give you the benefit of the doubt because they think that you're good at the end of the day. And then that makes them keep trying to make excuses for your perpetual awkwardness. If you are awkward, people think that you're good, or they don't think that you mean to be awkward, or like they don't think that you are purposefully sabotaging a situation, or like making people look at you as a result. Because if you sabotage a situation that's of people that are well-meaning, that are all there to just talk in like standardized ways within the rules, like people that show up to a place to just follow the rules and say all the things you're supposed to. If you go there and then you make it a point to, you go somewhere, you make it a point to be outside of the cultural norms of the gathering that's taking place, then you're obviously being awkward. But then people try to act like you're there to not be awkward, even though even from people who are perpetually displaying awkwardness, um, it's just a failure of I don't know, that this is that awkward. I was trying to be awkward, but not really. I didn't know I was going to talk about awkwardness, so now I got to try to be awkward the rest of the way. I think I got it handled. I think I'm pretty awkward. But it's difficult to leave that world. I find that it's difficult because then what, do I exist in a world where I have to where I stylize everything I do, or there's an intention for what I do, where people know what I'm doing? I mean, you don't have to jump off of awkward and then jump right into this new world where you aren't completely anymore. It's not like that. I think that that's part of the lie in overcoming. Do I overcome a title at the point that I've been processing this for a while, obviously, that I'm awkward because I receive feedback that I am, but like maybe I do it on purpose, but I don't want to reveal that, don't want to give away awkward, or like give that up. I want to keep it. I want it to be mine. But it's superstitious to stand over things and control them and make them whatever you want them to be. And people do that with all ideas, really. Like the idea that anybody owns an idea is ridiculous, but that's part of the problem. Like the world has this problem with identifying things or making something about an identity for a group of people, or just for anything that somebody says. People like to do this very legalistic thing where they take your words, and then whatever word you said applies to all instances of that word. like if you say Mexican, what you mean, you're speaking on behalf of all Mexicans, and so you don't get to say that because you have to consider every single instance of a Mexican before you say anything about any one of them, because people play identity politics with just with your words. Besides that, they make identity out of, for legal reasons, to say like, well, the territory of that word actually applies to all of these instances, and so you can't say that because that crosses this certain subsection of the territory. And it's a problem with identity, but it's a problem with grandstanding over ideas, where people think that they control an idea for whatever reason, or they get to stand over it. They like control it to the way that they want it to look, or that they own an idea. And so it's like, if I want to continue to tell people that my story is, oh, I'm just awkward, then I'm kind of like standing over awkward, because that's like, or I mean, I'm trying to make myself that, or like, but I'm making the point right in this moment that people don't control ideas. And I've heard Jordan Peterson say it, that this like philosophical point that people don't own ideas, ideas own people. But it's like, it's the case that people want to grandstand over an idea like transportation. Like, they like to say that transportation carries out in this specific form, or in these specific forms, or like the same pathways that we continue to go down. For example, the shape of the car, the definition of the car, people want to say that that is transportation, that vehicle is the vehicle, that is the shape in which transportation is supposed to happen, is the car. But we haven't like de-standardized or decentralized the car enough to say that there are like thousands of forms of transportation. It can look and be shaped in all of these different ways. Like there should be hundreds of hybrids between car and scooter, or like solo person elevators that exist, but things are so standardized to roads and cars, and like that transportation looks these 5 ways: car, airplane, and like very few forms of transportation that are a hybrid between cars and airplanes, or that occupy the space between the 2 heights of those forms of transportation. Like there aren't any very few hybridized, like, okay, there's something that travels at 100 feet above the ground for you that you can transport yourself in. Like we follow these very same pathways and keep repeating them as groups of people, or as corporations replicating what is basically the same car as another corporation or whatever. Like people grandstand over the idea, or like, and it's superstitious that we don't want to move off of that a car looks this way because it's worked out for us so long, and it's like a fear of alternative or original thought, or of creativity that will allow you to create, decentralize. People have to decentralize the shapes of transportation that they think that they know, and it's like a matter of people should be more open-minded. But it's like, I'm saying that people think that they own ideas, but it's like ideas own people. It's really like transportation is there no matter what way that people like to stand over certain sections of it and control transportation to say that this is what it should look like. People don't own ideas, ideas own people. But I'm saying like it's better to recognize ideas to flow through people, or exist in many different forms across society, like it be a character trait that exhibits itself in many different ways. Like there's very many different ways that any one idea can look, and like it's easier to say that that's true. You recognize that ideas are not controlled by people. Like we don't really have the ability to legally say this is what this thing looks like, and this is its title, and these are if somebody meets these 3 criteria, they fall in that category or whatever, because people don't legally own any ideas. The ideas are just there, and like you see that that's true because relatively there's somebody who is this much more a bully than somebody else. And it's like the idea exhibits itself in so many different forms across many different people that you wouldn't really be able to say like nobody really owns it. Nobody owns an idea. Nobody owns it. Nobody owns the standard for racism to say, like, by the way, definitely racism is always this, whenever this. So you, like, nobody gets to tell somebody else, hey, for sure, like, you're being racist, so now you're going to prison, or you're like, now you're going to racism prison for exhibiting too much racism, or whatever. Like, people will operate off of guidelines for what they think are the standards, and they'll follow the standards that are like the most people use them, like the most well-trodden pathway for standards of racism, is to say, well, what is a racist and what isn't. But in reality, like, nobody owns it, so nobody gets to control its form and the way that it's like distributed, or like nobody gets to say, by the way, it applies to you. Like, ideas are people don't own ideas. Ideas are ethereal and exist across, they exist not in a form that you know, and it's kind of like, I'd say that you go wrong. I mean, but obviously everybody's going to be superstitious. That's the way that life carries out. It's superstitious just to live in the same city for 7 years, because you're saying that you're controlling your own existence to exist in, like, what you could say is the prison within the walls of that city, or within the walls of an apartment or house that you live in the same house for 40 years. That's superstitious, because you're grandstanding over your place of living, or like, I mean, you're standing over your possessions and what you own in this same form of living for too long. Like, you're standing over it rather than moving on to something else, or saying, allowing yourself to exist more unidentified, or go wherever. Like, I'm saying superstition kind of persists in everything, so it's impossible to allow all ideas to just flow everywhere, because people are always controlling ideas. That's why they have possessions. That's why they possess things. That's like the idea of it. You possess something, then you control a section of an idea that somebody. But it's like, people selling things is superstition, ownership and possession. People saying that they possess something. Obviously, this exists. It's not like completely true that ideas ideas own people. People don't own ideas. That's just a way of looking at it that might be helpful, because people do own ideas. They own possessions. They've controlled certain sections of things, and people try to section off their own empires and whatever. They control things, and that's like hoarding wealth. Is the more you're controlling ideas, really. And so controlling ideas happens for everybody. Everybody has to be superstitious or whatever. But this is basically the so ideas don't, like, people don't own ideas, whatever, or ideas kind of exist in lots of different forms, and so it's not necessarily the case that any one person owns them. But like, being awkward, I'm saying, is yeah, it's whatever. I'm just sharing it with you. I'm awkward, and then I don't own it, so I don't really get to say, I especially don't get to say, like, this is the way that people see it, because people, even if they call you awkward, they're not just seeing awkward, they're seeing that mixed with a number of other judgments that they could be making. And it's like, trying to say, like, oh, this is always my story, like, I'm awkward, falling back on that excuse. You could do the same thing with anxiety or anything. Like, well, I'm always anxious, and then that's one that, like, the qualities of that cause you to not go outside if you really make that your thing. Like, if I made awkward my thing, then it's kind of more in the territory of, like, oh, I possess it, or like, I know what it means, when in reality, I don't know what it means, because it exists in so many other people, that it's like, I wouldn't, I'm saying I'd go wrong to be like, oh, that's what I do in life. And rather than, I think it's better to realize that it might be better for me to realize I don't own ideas, but rather that any one of them could exist, and really it's not up to me to decide when it is displayed or how, and it's really up to the rest of people that they're kind of a reflection of you. Other people are like a reflection of you, and then they reflect back with their judgments or any feedback they give to you, which is kind of invaluable if you consider it. Like, it's probably important that you go somewhere where it's safe for people to criticize you, probably, at least sometimes, because the society that we live in is so non-confrontational that everybody kind of has to carry out thinking that everybody's good. And then this makes it difficult when negative qualities appear in you, and then you have to reconcile that or equate that with what you see with everybody else that you know. And then then you get anxiety for thinking that you're way more negative than everybody else or whatever, like, because there's not enough communication for people saying, hey, like, I have just as many negative qualities as you, because everybody has these negative qualities. But society has to carry out in better, in positive terms, and so this makes it non-confrontational and difficult. It makes it difficult for judgments themselves to be communicated, and so then, like, you might be left with your own limited uh ways, like you might be left to your own devices to explain your own existence a lot more when there isn't as much communication. And so then when that's the case, you probably have fewer judgments to go off of, and then you have a more low resolution view of yourself. And that low resolution view is like a view that is more exclusive of lots of ideas and would force you to have to stand over ones or whatever. I mean, like is whatever. So let me try to end this very awkwardly, since that's apparently what the thing is about today. I shouldn't have any problem doing that, right? But it's not like that's what I am all the time. And am I really awkward? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. It might just be something that I put on for certain situations, because people like to act like it doesn't exist. And so then somebody has to speak to it, because I don't own any of these ideas. And so, like, me invoking it or speaking to it, it kind of brings it more into focus, where it's like it needs representation somewhere, because it's kind of more like a person or something like that, that you can't slough off, discard all the persons and problems or ideas or groups of people that you don't like, you can't relegate them to the subconscious society, because that shit always comes back around. Like, I mean, I guess not always. Sometimes something just dies and then everybody can forget about it. I don't really know. But that's up to you. Watch out for vaccines. I don't know. I'm scared of them. I don't want to take a vaccine. I'm scared. I don't think anybody should do that. I think that it's bad. I think that there are really harmful intentions from people that are rolling those out. That's not necessary, and but wasn't necessary for me to say that. And talk to you all later. Goodbye.